without all of you joining in to spread the message. And we know this message is very, very important. And so we are here to talk about International Overdose Awareness Day. We do have a very, very special guest. And I think it is important that all of you are joining us. So we just want to thank you for taking time to join us on this day. Throughout this week, we've been doing our campaign, 11 minutes and counting. You may ask yourself, what is important about 11 minutes? Well, every 11 minutes, someone in this country dies from an opioid overdose. And today we have Lauren Sisler, who's going to be joining us in just 1 second. And what's so important about her story is she lost both of her parents to an opioid overdose. So I encourage you right now to share this with your friends, share this with your family. This is going to be a very important conversation for today. And so at this time, I'm going to bring Lauren in to join us in on the conversation. Hi, Lauren.
Hello, how's it going? I'm so excited to see your beautiful face, Joy. We've been working on this campaign for several weeks now, obviously kicking things off last week, and it's just an honor and a blessing. And I'm just so thankful to everyone out there that's watching right now, that's a part of this. I'm already getting some love from my Giles Spartan family.
So we're already getting some love, some comments, people where you're watching. I see that. Let's put that up on the screen. Okay, we have people, proud Spartan family watching. We're glad that you're tuning in. Thank you, Leslie. Please make sure to share this with anyone that you know so that we can make sure we get as many people listening to the conversation tonight. I know both Lauren and I have shared it on our personal Facebook pages as well. But just to give you a little history with Lauren and I, our relationship goes back probably 15 years.
Yes, about 15 years. That's probably about right if I'm doing the math correctly. Well, hold on a sec. I was at WDBJ 07 to 09. So we're coming up on 13 years when things kind of started there.
Right. So 13 years ago, and this is how I connected with Lauren for this campaign. I remember her telling the story of how she had lost her parents. I didn't know the details, but I just remember thinking, wow, this young woman in her 20s had lost both of her parents. And at that time, Lauren really wasn't sharing much of her story. So Lauren, take me back to that time when your parents passed away and you were just starting to share little bits and pieces. What had kept you from kind of revealing to people what was going on with your family?
Well, first and foremost, I'll start by saying when we met back at WDBJ 7, when I started working there, I had graduated from Rutgers and I'd always had aspirations, in recent years to be a sports broadcaster. And so that's kind of what brought me to DBJ, was to learn the foundation of television news reporting and to get to work with you on that venture. So, I went from Rutgers, came back home, was living at home with my Auntie Linda, who is on the feed right now too, says hello. Hello, Auntie Linda. Linda Rohr there.
Hello,
I had
Auntie Linda.
I was so blessed and thankful to have someone like my Auntie Linda and my Uncle Mike who really took me under their wing because here's the thing. I was 18 years old when both of my parents passed away. And it was very tragic. It was very unexpected. It was my second semester at Rutgers. And I really just had no idea that they were going through this addiction. I had no idea the challenges that they were facing. Both of my parents were seeing a pain management doctor. Both of them were struggling with chronic pain. My mom had degenerative disc disease. She had multiple surgeries over the course of time. My dad had chronic back pain, was also seeing that same pain management doctor. And, unfortunately, over the course of time, they became more and more reliant on those prescription drugs to help them to function every day, to get out of bed, to be able to go to work and all those things. And so really that was kind of how things sort of started to progress for them. And so when I got the phone call that freshman year in college from my dad, I had just hung up the phone with my parents hours before I'd went to bed. And so it was very unexpected when my dad called me and said, "Lauren, your mom died."
Wow.
And I said, "What? What do you mean mom died?" I just talked to her on the phone and he could give me no explanation. He said, "Lauren, just get on the next plane you can. I'll be at the airport to pick you up." And I remember having to call my brother Alan and just say, mom died. And of course he was confused and shocked and wondering what happened. And, I get on that airplane, I fly into the Roanoke airport. And I remember in that moment just anxiously awaiting, to run and jump in my dad's arms. Cause all I wanted in that moment was to know everything was going to be okay. I wanted my dad to tell me everything was going to be okay. And so when I grabbed my bag, I ran out of the airport. I was expecting to see my father there to pick me up. He said he was going to be there. And instead it was my Uncle Mike and my cousin Justin who arrived at the airport essentially, to let me know that my dad too had passed away. And I just remember those words just like cutting me. And, my Uncle Mike having to deliver that news in the way that he did. He's an ER doctor, and he's, accustomed to delivering news like that. But unfortunately, he said that was one of the toughest things he's ever had to say and to do in that moment. And I think the hardest part, Joy, was that nobody really knew what had happened. There was no explanation. Nobody could look me in the eye and say, this is how your parents died.
Right. So all you knew, Lauren, if I understand you as you're telling your stories, that you get a call from your dad who says to you, your mom has passed away. You had just talked to her, like you said, not that long ago. You get in the airplane, get to Roanoke, thinking you're going to see your dad, only to learn that your dad had also passed away. So in that moment, I know you said you guys didn't have any clue. What was going through your mind, like trying to figure out what could have happened? Because I know at that time, addiction wasn't even on your radar.
Yeah, I mean, I think taking my mind back into that moment, there was so much shock inside of me and almost this, paralyzed feeling of just not understanding it and not knowing. And I think for me, as someone, again, that was kind of sheltered from some of those things, I knew that addiction existed. I knew that addiction was out there. My dad struggled with alcoholism throughout my childhood, but he managed it, and he wasn't what I would have considered to be a non-functioning member of society. And I think that's the picture that we paint for addicts and alcoholics. And I know we'll get to that in a minute, but going through my mind, I really just could not comprehend what had happened. But, Joy, looking back on it now, I think part of it was this shield of denial that I just threw up. I threw up a shield of denial because I didn't know what happened, and I didn't want to know what happened because I was so fearful of what that was going to be. But honestly, I in that moment, and it would be 90 days before we as a family would even have the autopsy and toxicology reports. And I remember my aunt walking into the coroner's office that day to get those autopsy reports. And she came out to the car with the manila envelope, that had their names on the outside of it. And, she looked at me and asked me if I wanted to read it. And I said no. And that was it. And we left it alone. And so I think that there was a level of protection there, and sort of just dealing with the loss and the tragedy sort of in my own terms, and the kind of allowing me to breathe and just sort of take it all in for what it was. And we didn't really address what had happened openly for what became a really long time. And at least in me more specifically, it took me many years to get to a place where I can sit here on this couch and look at you guys and share their story.
No, because I remember, if we go back to our time, I remember you sharing with me that your parents had died, but it never really clicked, at that time. And I know you said it took you so many years because of the shame and the stigma that sometimes is attached to this disease, unfortunately, to really be able, to share your story. But, I know you said hindsight is 2020. And when you look back, was there any moment in time when you've had this opportunity? I know this has been, sometime since your parents passed away, to say, was there anything that stood out to you if you're looking back at this moment?
Yeah. So to kind of put this in perspective for everyone watching, it's been 17 years since both of my parents passed away. It was March 24th of 2003 when they passed away. I was at DBJ, like I said, from 07 to 09. So even from then, it had been several years since they had passed. And so even my transparency with you, Joy, then was very, very minimal, very low. when you think back to maybe things I would have seen or thought about, and part of this comes with conversations I have had with my family, conversations I've had with my aunt and uncle, things that they've helped me to kind of piece together. Oh, well, do you remember this, or you look back on this? Here are a couple of things that really stand out to me. First and foremost, the weekends, I was a gymnast. I went to Rutgers on a gymnastics scholarship. I was living out my dream at Rutgers when all of this took place. And looking back, the weekends were sort of a time for the family, because I was to and from Roanoke, from Giles County, where I went to high school, back and forth for gymnastics practice. So the weekends were a time that I could actually like kick back, relax, and spend some time with my family. And we loved watching TV. We loved watching, sports on TV, college football, NFL, NASCAR. And then, we turn on a movie. And I just remember there were times where my dad would fall asleep and literally, have the remote like this pointed in the air. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, he's probably just tired. He's had a long week at work. He used to commute to and from work. It was about an hour each way to the VA medical center where he used to work. And so in my mind, I'm like, well, he's just tired. He's just tired.
Like you never in your mind did you think at that moment that this is what's going on. And I remember you telling me this story too about a Christmas time before this happened with your father. And that you guys didn't even realize at that moment that this was something that was going on.
Well, actually, yeah, it was Thanksgiving. It was Thanksgiving that you're talking about.
Okay.
Yep. Thanksgiving. And so, and like I said, so that was kind of in high school seeing that. Well, then go to college. I talked to my parents every day on the phone. We were literally like this. And anyone that grew up around me and knew me and friends from home knew that we had a very, very close-knit relationship. And even when I went off to college, that never changed. And so, looking back on it, an incident that happened that you're referring to at Thanksgiving. So I was a freshman again at Rutgers, and this was my first semester. I had gotten on the train and come home, and I was just so excited to be home. My first time, being back home, seeing my parents since I had started my college career. And, just excited to be home for the holidays, a good home cooked meal. My mom was just, such a good cook and always making sure she took care of everyone. And I remember being home that Thanksgiving and waking up to her screaming downstairs. And I jump out of bed and my brother's downstairs, my dad's on the floor and he's unresponsive. And I remember picking up the phone and calling 911 because I was in a sheer panic. Everyone was in a sheer panic. What just happened? What is going on? And my dad ended up getting rushed to the hospital. And basically we were told that, I remember specifically being told that, my dad had bad reaction to medication. And so in my mind, a bad reaction to medication is, he took his blood pressure medicine and he took this and he took that and you mixed them together. I wasn't even in my mind thinking of anything to do with opioids or painkillers, even though I knew they were taking them. I never in a million years would have thought they were taking too many or taking too much to medicate. Again, they were functioning members of society. I just had no idea. And so that is what we were told. My mom told me, Lauren, your dad had a bad reaction to medication.
Wow.
He's going to be fine. And so, my dad ends up going to the hospital, goes to a treatment facility. I didn't know this. All I knew, I'm going back to Rutgers. Hey, Lauren, everything's going to be okay. Nothing to worry about. Everything's going to be okay. And that's all I remember. And then I get on a train again and come home for Christmas and everything seemed fine. Everything seemed normal. And so it just seemed like the pieces were being put back in place and there was nothing to be alarmed about. It was just a freak thing and everyone's fine. But come to find out, my dad had actually taken fentanyl. So my mom was prescribed fentanyl, which, we've outlined in this campaign as being, extremely, extremely lethal when taken the wrong way.
Well, I was going to add in here, Lauren, that it's like 10 times more potent than morphine. And actually, some of the overdoses that we're seeing a spike in overdoses right now, and that's what's being reported. In some places, overdoses are now surpassing COVID deaths, actually, and that's related to the fentanyl. So going back, you realized that it was fentanyl.
It was fentanyl. Yep. And so my mom had been prescribed fentanyl. So basically, they were going to this pain management doctor. Both of them were prescribed Oxycontin. Well, she wasn't able to manage the Oxycontin. And again, these are little things that I'm learning later. None of this stuff I was privy to. I was never in these open conversations. I was never opening the medicine cabinet and looking at the labels and being like, what is this? It didn't seem necessary. There was nothing that was overly alarming. Every once in a while, my parents might get into an argument that, oh, overheard my mom, you took my medication, did you take my last, pill or this or that? But again, it just seems sort of like one or two situations and nothing. But with the fentanyl, my mom had been prescribed the fentanyl. My dad was on Oxycontin. And because my mom couldn't manage the Oxycontin, that is why she was then prescribed fentanyl. And again, that is typically given to terminally ill patients. So my mom being on fentanyl, she's got a patch on, she's sucking on one of those fentanyl suckers. And I'm just thinking like, this is prescribed, like this is normal, what's wrong with this picture here? Nothing. It's my mom's waking up, getting out of bed, going to church, obviously coming to the gym, taking me to practice. We're going to gymnastics meets. She needs this to function. Okay.
Right.
She's managing her pain. It's fine. But with the fentanyl, my dad had basically, he told my mom that he had read online somewhere that you could essentially put the fentanyl in the freezer, cut it up, and take it orally. He, I guess, was in a lot of pain and, dealing with, obviously, I'm assuming the dope sickness of the prescription drugs, needing something and wanting to get that immediate fix from the drug. And so that is sort of what he tested out and unfortunately overdosed from it. But we were there and able to save his life
that time. And now just looking back, like you said, these are all hindsight 2020s, and you're looking back and experiencing that. And I think that's why it's so important to have the conversation that we're having today, that people will look for those signs, because there have been so many people who have started out on a prescription painkiller and a prescription medication and have gotten to this point, have gotten to the point of addiction. And it's happening in all of our communities. And the sad part is, Lauren, as we're talking about this, is that people do feel like they have to keep it a secret. So we have people probably who are listening today or who are going to listen to the replay of this who feel like they have to keep this a secret, that no one can know about this. And let's talk about the secret and how you felt you had to keep the secret. Once you did find out that my parents died from an opioid overdose, there still was this level of secrecy. Why did you feel such this need to keep it a secret? I remember you had said even your best friend that you think you would tell everything to, you did not even tell your best friend for years.
Yeah. It's really a crazy journey, because as I sit here and share this so openly, I think about where I was years ago. I was helpless. I was hopeless. I was broken. So much grief, so much pain, and really so much shame. And I think that's the key word here, is shame, because I felt that it was up to me and my family to preserve my parents' legacy. My parents, were such loving people and were loved by so many. And I just remember, people would come over to the house and spend time with us on the weekends, and they were always just a part of our lives. People loved spending time with them, loved hanging out with my parents. Always, full of energy, fun to communicate with. And really it just, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But then this thing happens, and all of a sudden you're having to learn, I guess, how to tell people that my parents were in fact addicts. I never wanted to tell people that my parents died of overdose, because the word overdose and addiction in the same sentence with my parents' names just didn't make sense.
What was
no
the fear,
way.
Lauren? What was the fear? What were you worried people would think? What was
I was
that fear?
afraid. I was afraid that people would judge my parents. They would judge them for being addicts. Well, certainly they couldn't be good parents if they were addicts. They must have not cared about Lauren and Alan. They must have not cared about their family. If they're addicts, how are they able to function? They're living this secret, living this lie, because I think we're given this perception of what an addict is. And to me, and what I learned about addiction is an addict is the homeless man living under the bridge with a needle in his arm. You know, my parents aren't addicts. They don't fit that profile. They don't fit that persona. And I think that is the struggle that I had for so long, because why were my parents keeping it from us? Because they were ashamed. So I felt that I had to do the same thing because there was so much shame involved in this, right? And so to me, I think that's the crazy part, is that you know, with all the shame and everything else we're feeling during this time, you know, I actually started painting this picture, Joy, where I would tell people, my parents died, you know, how did your mom and dad die? And I would say, well, my mom died of respiratory failure. That's true, right? Respiratory failure is certainly what happens when you do overdose from an opioid drug. So that wasn't false, but I wasn't really being transparent. And then, well, my dad died several hours later. So what is it exactly he died from? I would just say, you know, a heart attack, or, you know, heart problems. Well, yeah, you know, he had heart problems because his heart stopped because he quit breathing because he overdosed on fentanyl. And so being in my mind, being able to sugarcoat that and share that story the way that I did, Joy, for many years, even when I think I met you, I was still kind of hung up on that story because I had told it so many times that in my mind, as I'm envisioning what happened to my parents, that was the story. So I was in denial. And obviously, you know, you say something so much, so often for so long that you almost begin to believe it. And so that those walls of denial were put up around me so that everyone thought that, that this tragic accident with my parents was just something, you know, nobody could really wrap their mind around. And they just kind of quit asking questions, because at that point, you know, it's a tough thing to address. And people, you know, people are afraid to ask questions, right? And
you know
I
what
think
I
that's
think
just
about,
the
Lauren?
shame that comes with it.
Oh, sorry. I know I don't mean to interrupt you there, but I was just thinking back to that moment because I still remember the story of your parents. Like, I remember hearing it because it was so much to hear someone to lose both of their parents within hours of each other. So I do remember, but I still feel like in my mind it was really foggy, you know, like you said, as to what happened. So at what point did you get to the place that you were like, I can share it? What shifted? What shifted in your mind or in your heart that said, I have to own this for my parents? I can't let the stigma and the shame and any of that stop me from sharing their story.
Well, I think, Joy, it was twofold. You know, I think it was education, and I think it was awareness. The understanding that addiction exists in so many places. It does not discriminate. It does not matter where you grow up, the house you grow up in, the job that your parents hold, the car that you drive, the job that you hold. None of that stuff matters. And, you know, I found out that, you know, while I thought in front of it all that we had this great family dynamic, two loving parents, but then behind it all, obviously this was going on behind closed doors. And, you know, where everything really, I guess, sort of came to fruition for me was, you know, and again, it was a progression, and this did not happen overnight, because I told you it took me 7 years for me to even share with my best friend what had happened. You know, my best friend growing up had no idea that this was going on. And even still to this day, when I talk to her, shout out to Ellie Augustine, love you, girl. You know, even to this day, like, there's still foggy things about this situation that happened, so many questions. But I'll tell you what really started to happen, Joy, was, you know, and again, I told you that my aunt would, she shared the autopsy reports with me. I chose not to open them. Okay, you know, that's fine. So little by little, I had built up these walls around me, and little by little, it's like she started to kind of pull the bricks back, right? And started to break down this wall. And she would try to have a conversation, you know, a very loving conversation. And I would get so feisty and just like fight back on, I don't want to listen to, I don't want to hear about it. I don't know. Like, we're not going to talk about it. And so I found myself resisting. But over time, I started to kind of let those conversations come in. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I had grown up and I had matured, and maybe some of that shock and sort of that denial was starting to wear off. And I was starting to see, like, this is a real thing. And people are going through this every single day.
Right.
This is real. And if I'm going to sit here and be, hide from this and be shackled to this shame, it was like weighing down on me because I'm a very energetic, lively person. Most people that have been around me know that's just who I am, right? You and I used to dance around the newsroom and cut up and get crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like I was becoming this like shell of myself because underneath it all was this shame. And so where I think I really, took that turn, like I said, my aunt started to kind of like piece it together, sort of, educate me along the way. And then I started kind of getting my own education and awareness about what addiction was and what it looked like, and that it doesn't look the same for any single person. But where I started to really turn the page and ultimately own my story. So as I work towards becoming a sports reporter, I get this opportunity to share stories. You get to go out and share stories. We get to be a public service to other people. And what I mean by that is that it's the stories I think that we get to share with people that give people hope, that give people insight into light,
Right.
perspective.
Yes.
And
Every day. Yes. That's
you
huge.
know, it's
Right.
huge. It is absolutely huge. And and I'll be honest, I mean, I looked up to you when I was at DBJ7.
Oh,
Yes, I wanted to go into sports. I wanted to go into sports, but I got to work on so many stories with you, and you would do all these like just heartwarming stories, and I just said like this is so amazing, the reward that you get from sharing this story, because even if it impacts one person.
right.
And so here I
Come
am
on and
as a
preach it.
sports reporter. Yeah, girl. So even as a sports reporter, I found I love sports. I love the game. I love the national championships. I love doing snow angels and the confetti on the field. But at the end of the day, that confetti stands for so much more than a win. That confetti stands for all the stories that surround, athletics, the coaches, the fans, the people, and the community. It's so much greater than a game. And when I started to realize like people come to me and want to share their stories, I get to be a voice and a platform. Like, this is cool. Like it used to be like, oh, cool, look, I'm on TV. And now I'm like, wait a sec, like I get to actually do something in a positive way for other people. Nothing better than that. And so then as that started kind of coming to fruition, I started realizing, wait a sec, like I'm sharing all these people's story, but I can't even share my own.
Right.
And I was literally gripped by this fear and this shame and this judgment, because I thought, well, people are going to love me less. They're going to love my parents less. Maybe they're going to treat me differently. Maybe I'm going to miss out on opportunities for jobs because if they find out that Lauren lost her parents to drug overdoses, well, what kind of background does she come from? If they, is she a drug addict? Is she going down that path? Is she potentially going to face those issues? So these are all the things going on in my mind constantly. And then I realized, okay, I can't be truthful and be a good journalist sharing other people's story if I can't even be my own journalist and be able to share my
Yeah.
own story.
Well, what's powerful about that, Lauren, is that once you did come forward, right? I remember you telling me this, us having a conversation about this. So hopefully it'll click in your mind when you did ultimately start sharing it, even with your parents' friends. So you thought there was going to be this like stigma attached to you, but it was like the opposite of people coming to you and telling you, just encouraging you. So what you had built up, I guess, this lie in your head that people weren't going to accept you, but you found it to be opposite. What was it like when you finally got the courage and you shared it?
Oh, wow. I don't want to get choked up here. Um, it was freeing.
Girl, you gonna make me cry up on this
I
lie.
know, because I felt like I was living in shame, and I knew that's not the way my parents wanted me to live, and to live in these shadows. And you know the thought process of what had ultimately happened to them and all their friends and everyone around them. I'll never forget this, and my aunt told me this story, and it's a tough one. But before my parents had passed, my mom at one point had said that she felt like she didn't have any friends.
Oh,
And I think that she was feeling a level of depression and despair and, felt like she didn't have support and she didn't have people around her. And the thing is at the end of the day, my brother was off in the Navy. He was traveling. Of course, I went off to college, and then my auntie Linda was there, and they were like this. Um, I mean, unbelievably close. And she had told my auntie Linda that, and just to think like when my parents, the day of their funeral, when I remember sitting in the front of the chapel and looking back and seeing the amount of people that were in there to pay their respects to both of my parents. Just to think that my mom at one point in her life thought she didn't have any friends and that nobody cared. And
mm,
so that's why we're here. Like, we're here to tell people that we do care and that you are worth it. And that no matter what you've been through, no matter the struggles that you've been through, you are worth it. And I think that's sometimes lost on people because addiction comes with things that are, it can be construed as negative because of what addiction does to people. And people think addiction is a choice. And at some point in your life, yes, addiction can be a choice. Addiction can start as a choice, but eventually you lose control. You lose
right.
control of all of that. And, honestly, I think for me, losing that sort of control was so hard in the process of this, but ultimately learning the truth about it all and to know that both of my parents were fighting this concealed battle, and that when I did share their story with people, the response from people was, your parents loved you and your brother. They were so proud of you. They lit up ear to ear every time they talked about you and your brother. And to me, that just meant the world to me to know that that despite how my parents passed away, they were not defined by how they died, but by how they lived. And I feel like I'm able to carry that light for them and shine light on this crisis and this epidemic that we're faced with. And again, letting everybody know you are worth it, no matter how much shame you feel, no matter how much you've gone through, whether you yourself are an addict or a loved one, that you can get through this and there is help. And we've got to break those shackles of shame and
Right.
let people know that that you are not alone and that there are resources out there and that we can get through this, and we got to stand arm in arm together
We
to
do.
get through this thing.
Because, even as, I got emotional there, just listening to your story because I don't know, just really touches my heart because I know there's so many people that are out there who are struggling right now. We've seen it at American Addiction Centers. More people are relapsing during this time because of isolation and stress and anxiety, and all of those things are triggers for a relapse. We also know that people are turning to substances just to cope. And, I think just bringing awareness to this and telling people, that's why we wanted to have a phone number on the screen that if you know someone who's struggling, if you yourself are struggling, there is help out there, there is hope out there. And, I know we've had a moment here of tears, but you have still found joy, Lauren. And I think the thing that is so powerful about your story, and I don't want people to leave here on a sad note,
Mm-mm.
is that you have found, even in the midst of this, that you have found joy in sharing your story and giving back to so many people through this. So what has it been like for you now, just sharing your story? And what do you want other people to know about hope? I mean, because people hear, oh my goodness, you lost both of your parents within 24 hours of each other. How could you have hope? How could you have joy? But when I see your smile and I see you move on and I see you dancing on the field during your NFL games and stuff, girl, when I see that, I'm like, how did you find that joy? How did you find that hope? And how would you give that to others today?
Well, obviously, as we've outlined, during this broadcast, it really and truly has been a process, and it didn't happen overnight. And I think that we try to put a timeline on things. I think in
Mhm.
this life and society paints this picture that we feel like, okay, here's the stages of grief, and here's the stages of anger, and this, and this, and this, and this. But when all is said and done, you're going to have your own timeline. Everyone handles things and copes with things differently. And so, this wasn't easy. And obviously it weighs on me. It weighs on me, but in so much more of a positive way. And I think we've outlined this, and I talked to you about this before, Joy, is that one thing that really kind of stands out to me is going through this experience has given me such a love for people and an understanding for people and a love for all people. No matter what it is they're going through, all walks of life, races, ethnicities, religions, people that have experienced things, because I think that everyone in this lifetime experiences challenges, and they experience various things in life that help to sort of develop the narrative of their life. And so I think that we live in this world where everyone's narrative and everyone's story is different. And I think that we can do a better job of accepting people for that. And yes, don't get me wrong. It's hard when someone's in the throes of addiction and you just want to shake them and say, wake up, like, you don't need this. You can get through this. But ultimately, in finding that hope, it it has helped me essentially to be able to be that voice and that platform for other people. And so as people are looking for that same measure of hope, number one, I would just say, you got to knock out the stigma. You got to knock out the shame. And if you can do that first and foremost, you're going to feel this weight lifted off your shoulders. And I'm not even speaking to just drug and alcohol addiction. There are addictions that come in so many different shapes and sizes, and a multitude of addictions and different challenges that people face. And the mental health crisis we're in right
Oh,
now,
wow. Yes.
greater than ever, right? And people
Suicide.
with
I
depression,
mean, mm,
suicides, and drugs and alcohol are certainly at the root of that oftentimes because of the medication and self-medicating to try to overcome and cope with that. But with that being said, finding that hope and really building up that resilience. And I think that's where I've learned to flip the script. Number one, as I said, my love and compassion for people, but my love and compassion for life. Because I think when it is pulled out from under you and it is gone like that, it makes you take a step back and realize, you can't control everything. Unfortunately, in this world, we can't control everything. I just got married May 30th. And oh, by the way, in the midst of this pandemic, right?
but
So
but can I pause right there on the marriage thing? Because you said one of the fears that you had is that because you didn't have your parents and you had lost them to addiction, that no one would want to marry you. So I think this is a full circle moment.
full circle. I know. You can
And you
ask my
got married before I did. I don't even know how that happened.
oh, well, look, I'll tell you, it's wild because I remember sitting next to my auntie Linda and I just like started crying and I said, nobody's gonna want to marry me because I don't have parents. Like people are gonna think that, I'm what did I come from? And people aren't gonna understand this. And then when I actually have to tell them the story, they're not gonna understand it. And so to come full circle to get married, number one, super blessed. Shout out to my husband, John Willard, who's upstairs right now. I had to tell him like every time I go live in the living room here, I'm like, okay, be quiet. I'm going live. That's what COVID does, right?
Mhm.
But we ended up getting married May 30th, and we were actually supposed to get married at Mountain Lake. So all my people there on the comment feed, I see, from Giles County know all about Mountain Lake. Of course, my Roanoke friends too. So we're saving the celebration for next year. But in the meantime, we said, why wait? And I think during that process, it was sort of like, yes, don't get me wrong. I laid on this couch and cried for a couple days. I was upset about it. You dream of getting married. It's like putting the white dress on and like you've always dreamed of that. But here's where I want to come full circle on that too. So we ended up getting married in the church here in Birmingham, Alabama. And it went from 200 people to 8 people, shrinking that down, right? But you do get caught up in the pomp and circumstance. You get caught up in the things that really don't matter. Okay, what color for this font, and how are you gonna, what kind of stamp are you gonna put on the envelope? Like, really, if you heard the
Mhm.
conversations that were going on constantly, I mean, it's like, whoa. But what's crazy about it is I was very fearful that, you know, every bride hopes that they're going to have their father there to walk them down the aisle. And I've got some beautiful pictures that I paid homage to both of my parents and took my mom and dad's wedding photo and wrapped it around my bouquet and
Oh,
walked down the aisle with them attached to my bouquet in my hands. It was very cool.
girl, you're gonna make me
Um,
cry again.
I know.
Oh, that was really special.
But what was so amazing about that moment is, I was so fearful that my day would be consumed in the thoughts of them not being here, them not being here to walk me down the aisle, them missing out on those things. And it's something I've talked about, and I've thought about for years, thinking like maybe I'm not even shouldn't get married, like if that's a thing. But when those doors opened and when it was time for me to walk down the aisle, it's almost like all of that left me. And in some ways, I almost think that, I felt their presence there, but it wasn't a sadness. And I think that's where we flip this script to hope. And for people to realize, that have lost loved ones, like they are in you, they are shining bright inside of you. And you've just got to let them out, right? Like I had my parents bottled up. Let them out, let them shine.
And like
And
you
then
said, they were such great people. The addiction didn't have to define all of who they were. You said they were great parents. They had so much that they gave to you and your brother, and they, are still with you.
absolutely. And I want to put it out there, far from perfect. No family's perfect. Every family has its dysfunction, let's be real. And so that's another thing I want to point out to people that, addiction will make people do things that you would never in a million years dream up. Say and do things that, are unacceptable and or painful, harmful, hurtful. But I just, if you've lost a loved one to addiction or you have someone that's battling it, I just want you to know that you can still love them, that you can still love them with all of your heart. And it doesn't, it doesn't make them bad people. And
Exactly.
underneath it all, they are struggling with this thing that is consuming them. That is consuming their everyday life. And so I think that you still have to find it in your heart to continue to love those people. And again, to find that hope and knowing that maybe one day, and, I even like to look past the word maybe, because in my mind, it's not a maybe. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when they step out of that addiction and break their own shackles and be able to stand up against this creature and this disease that has such a tight grip on so many people. And I think that's where we can really stand in the gap for people and remind them that it is possible and not to give up hope.
Well, that's a great way to end this segment. I was going to say segment. It seems like we have a whole show going on, but I think that it's such great information that you share because at American Addiction Centers, we see people, their lives changed every day. I remember when I first started working here, we have a lot of people who work with us who are in recovery, and to see their stories, they are some of the most beautiful people that I've met. And I'm honored to work with so many people who are able to stand up and give back to so many people from the pain and all of that they've been through. But I think that's just a message of hope today, that there is hope no matter your story. That Lauren coming here to share her story is a reminder to us all to not give up, to keep hope alive, and to know to reach out for help. If you're someone who's struggling, to reach out for help. So, Lauren, I just want to ask you one last question. And then if anybody has any questions for Lauren, we are looking at the chat. We'll take a couple of questions if they're out there. But what's next for you, Lauren? You are on a mission now. You're sharing the story of your parents. You're ready to, keep making sure as many people as possible hear this. What's next for you? I heard a documentary. Is that true?
Yeah, so we're working on some different things, some different projects, and first and foremost, I want to say a big thank you to the Addiction Prevention Coalition here in Birmingham. I partnered with them several years ago and have been volunteering with them for quite some time, and just so thankful for kind of what they've done to bring the message to the forefront, really to educate me and educate our community. And so that's sort of a resource that we have here in Birmingham. So a big shout out to them and thank you. But in terms of like my personal journey, it's just sort of those stepping stones. And so I did actually start, doing more speaking, public speaking, and not here just in this small footprint of Birmingham, Alabama, but really reaching my arms out and traveling all over the country to share my story and really just share perspective on this thing and really to just give people hope. And so, that's one part of this is just having the opportunity to go to different organizations, corporate events, obviously, talk to students, student athletes, whatever it may be, to share that story and that message of hope and really just help people to make the right decisions moving forward, because it's twofold. It's education, it's also prevention. And so I think that we can definitely team up to do that. And then, you talk about the documentary, kind of coming to you soon. We worked on this documentary, a short film, if you will, about a 20-minute film that we're going to be doing a virtual tour with coming up. And I don't have all the details just yet, but when I get those details, I will make sure I put that out on social media. And I know my friends at the American Addiction Centers will help share it.
Yes.
And you, Joy, have just been a joy to work with. And, I as we close this thing out, I just want to say that I don't think anything happens by accident. And you saw this scared, sort of fragile girl, I think, back when we worked together at DBJ7. I put on a big front sometimes. You dance around the newsroom, you're like, this girl's got it going on, right?
Yeah, I did think that.
I don't know about that. But, I think that I think it's almost like you saw something and you knew something was there and you couldn't quite put your finger on it. And then you've almost been sort of on the sidelines watching me grow, watching my career grow. I've done the same with you. And that's what I love about our business, getting to watch people grow in their respective careers and their personal lives and everything else. And so I just, I want to say thank you for this opportunity. When you called me and said, hey, we want to partner with you to do this campaign, like, oh my gosh, absolutely. But this was not a coincidence, Joy.
No, we know this. We know this.
We are just getting started.
Yeah.
But I just want to call a call to action from everybody that's watching, everybody that's going to watch this. Like, stand up, speak out, be a voice for change, and have this conversation, and ultimately know that there is help and there is hope, and that we together can fight this thing. And, I'm going to put a big old flex muscle on addiction and say, get out of here.
Yes, because we can do that. And the last thing I want to end with is that if you did miss our campaign this week, 11 minutes and counting, that there are videos that you can go back and watch that walk you through the signs that someone maybe is experiencing an overdose. They tell you how to administer Narcan or naloxone, which is an overdose reversing drug. We all should educate ourselves. We all have to remind ourselves it can happen to anyone. Addiction does not discriminate. It's in our communities. It's in our families. It's among our loved ones. And so if anything we leave you with tonight, it's to make sure that you're educated and make sure that you're prepared to help a loved one in need to get help if they need it. Thank you so much, Lauren. It's been an honor to do this campaign with you. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining us on tonight. And to all of you, we see all of your comments. Thank you so much for spending almost an hour with us as we delved into this and allow Lauren to have a space to share her story with so many of you. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you. Love you.
Love you too.